Chapter 34. Life is precious. I finally understand it. The meaning of life. Life is love and hate, pain and bliss, gain and loss, life and death. And in between, among the cracks of all that we have endured, life is precious. Jess's journal. The room was full. David was on one side of Jess, Carrie and Aaron on the other. Tina stood at the foot of the bed with Dr. Farley and was speaking in low tones to the doctor about the healing properties of a certain native plant as they finished putting the room in order. The baby lay nestled in David's arms, her blue eyes wide open and staring at the world, a look of bewildered amusement on her tiny face. David stared at her intently, surprised when he had discovered his cheeks were wet with tears. He gazed at his newborn daughter, shocked at how tiny she was and how perfect. Twin wails began piercing the room as Chris bustled in, a tiny bundle in each arm. As usual, they were wailing in symphony, one after the other. "I held them as long as I could," he said to his wife, "but they definitely want their mama." Carrie's thin face lit up, and the circles beneath her eyes were testament to the lack of sleep she had been receiving as of late. "I think they just wanted to meet their new baby cousin," Carrie said, as Michael and Julie instantly quieted in her arms. Her heart surged with happiness. Her pregnancy had coincided with Jess's, but Carrie had been terrified to hope, even once her belly had pushed out to an enormous size, and Dr. Farley told her he thought she might be pregnant with twins. Her labor had been quick, and the babies had been tiny, not quite 5 pounds each, but perfect. There hadn't been a whisper of complications, and both were thriving, despite being born nearly a month early. That had been nearly 2 weeks ago. How many times had she despaired of ever having a child, of being able to hold her own flesh and blood in her arms? And yet after all of the years of pain and misery, of miscarriage and stillbirth, she held 2 perfect and beautiful babies in her arms. How she wished Gramps could have seen them. Joseph, newly arrived from Tennessee, stood uncertainly in the doorway. He had come out with traders and a stack of hand-bound journals to sell, somewhat rudderless since Mr. Lyles had passed away last summer. Tall and handsome, he had locked eyes with Tina, and suddenly a short visit had turned into a semi-permanent stay. He had stayed in the city, welcomed instantly into the large brick Victorian that housed Penelope and her husband Kip, along with a small health clinic and dorms for the interns. There they had stayed until 2 months ago, when Chris had asked for Joseph's help cleaning up Mr. Banks's home. There were new families moving into the area, but Mr. Banks had willed it to Jess and David, and they in turn had given it to Carrie and Chris. It didn't feel right, letting it sit vacant, despite what had happened there, and the homes were close to each other, allowing the siblings along with their families to be within walking distance of each other. Chris and Jacob's relationship had smoothed out in the months following the deaths of Cooper and old Mr. Banks. Seeing how much the boy had tried to protect his mother from the psychopath's attack had brought home to him how different Jacob was from his father, and how much of Jess's goodness he held within him. Jess smiled at Chris's brother-in-law. "Would you like to hold her?" she asked. Joseph nodded, and David handed the newborn gently to the teenager. Joseph was well familiar with babies, from Liza's to the recent birth of Carrie's twins, and now this one. Her tiny eyes opened briefly, and he smiled at the flash of blue. "What is her name?" he asked, staring transfixed at the newest member of his extended family. "Hope," Jess was surprised as she uttered the name aloud. She and David had stayed up late so many nights, working through names, trying different combinations. Nothing had seemed to stick, and eventually they had agreed that they would just have to wait and see who their baby was, boy or girl. "We will know when we see the baby," she had told David. "We will just know. I will know in that moment." And that moment had arrived. For all that they had been through, for all that they had endured and lost, and for the friends and family gained along the way, for the nation they had seen crumble, and the new world that they had built with their hands, sweat, blood, and tears. Hope. The rays of the sun peeked through the window. The warmth crawled along the floor and lit up a newborn baby and the family she belonged with. It was a brave new world, and a beautiful life had just begun.